Getting through beginning Greek is one of the most challenging things most students have ever done when they come to learn the task of learning the language. Now, it's very tempting to think that because you could go and do it through the natural language acquisition approach that it actually should be really easy, but it's not easy. And part of the reason is that because we're learning to read a piece of literature, namely the Word of God, the Scriptures, the Bible, as it was written 2,000 years ago by the original authors. Now, when we come to learn how to read the New Testament, we're actually learning how to get into the text of the New Testament quickly. And the approach that we use inside of Biblical Mastery Academy is intended to get you into the text in the first week or two. So we're trying to get you into the text of the New Testament as quickly as possible. And this is the way that we find the fastest way to get you into the text and get you some of the rewards of knowing the language well enough to be actually able to benefit from some time in the Scriptures. But it's also going to take a little bit of work on your part, and that means that we need to think through, well, how do you actually make time for this? What should you expect? And how do you do this? And I've really broken this down into 4 steps that are designed to help you to be able to do the work that's necessary to be able to get into the text of the New Testament in the original language as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Here's what I want to avoid for you. Most people, when they come to the task of learning Biblical Greek, the first thing they're asked to do is to learn the alphabet. And a lot of people, they sit there and they go, well, this is really hard. How do I do this? And it's almost like you can't understand why it doesn't just automatically sort of just get absorbed into you just because you read the text of like a grammar or something. And realistically, there's just more effort required to learn the language than reading a book. And this is one of the reasons why learning Greek or Hebrew or any other language for that matter is much more challenging than, say, studying history or something like that. When you study history, you're just gathering a whole bunch of facts and you're sorting them into your head so that you can recall them again later on. There is some of that with Greek, but more than that, you're actually developing skill with the language. And to develop skill takes a whole different approach than just simply reading. And so that's what these 4 steps are really all about, is helping you to develop the skills you need on a day-by-day and week-by-week basis. And the motto that we have at Biblical Mastery Academy is to take small, consistent steps toward mastery. But then I want to answer the question in this video, what does that look like? How do I take small, consistent steps toward mastery? So what I'm giving you here in these 4 steps is really a starting point to do exactly that. And the first thing you're going to want to do, step 1 of these 4 steps, if you like, to take more consistent steps toward mastery, is to actually set aside dedicated time to use to do the tasks that are going to be necessary to develop those skills. What do I mean by that? Well, effectively, if you just think that you're going to turn up, look at a course, watch a video, and that's all it takes, you're going to be bitterly disappointed. You actually need to go over the material in the lesson. You actually need to incorporate it into your own understanding, and you need to develop skills around how to recall it and how to rehearse it so you're able to do so quickly and easily. So start by setting aside time every day. And I recommend when you're starting beginning Greek that you start with about 15 to 30 minutes once a day. Okay, now that's not all the time you're going to need, but let's just start with, say, 15 minutes as a minimum chunk and then build it up over time till you're getting more to around 30 minutes a day. Now, depending on what sort of person you are is going to determine when you're going to want to do this task. I recommend that just as a default, you start by incorporating this into your morning routine. Now, if you already do a daily devotion in your morning routine, then that's a great time to tack on 10 to 15 minutes worth of Greek to start with and then start to build it out from there. Now, if you're going to do it that way, that means that it's going to probably mean you have to get up that amount of time earlier so that you can incorporate that time in. And that means you're probably going to want to go to bed a little bit earlier as well by at least that much so that you can ensure that you get the right amount of sleep. And of course that introduces things like you're going to have to fall asleep earlier and things like that. So I leave that to you. Now, in addition to one chunk of time you're going to need early in the morning or in the evening or whatever it is, I also recommend that during the day you take maybe 2 or 3 spots of time, maybe just for 2 to 5 minutes to review vocabulary and also to go through and just rehearse some of the parsing drills that you've learnt as well. And it may be that even some of the memorization work you might need to do could be incorporated into this time as well. But you don't need a lot of time. The point of this time really is to give your mind that ability to sort of just go over what you've already done earlier in the day so you can make sure that stays front of mind. Again, as you go on, the point here is that when you learn some of these things, they're going to be in your short-term memory. That means they're going to need to be reviewed and rehearsed more regularly than once they're in your long-term memory. Once they're in your long-term memory, we don't have to go over those things anywhere near as much. And one of the important tasks of beginning Greek is to ensure you move that new knowledge from short-term memory to long-term memory, which means you can then recall it without having to rehearse it anywhere near as often. And the trick to doing that is to space out the amount of time between your reviews so that you're reviewing it regularly and then less regularly until eventually you can recite it without having to look anything up or any dependencies. So start with a decent chunk of time in the morning. Add 2 or maybe 3 even times during the day where you're reviewing some of the things you've already gone through earlier in the morning. And of course, if you're going to work with a chunk of time later in the day, then it's just going to spread that time into different parts of the day. The second step then is to follow the instructions. And what I mean by that is in our Beginning Greek course, Beginning Greek in Small Steps, I actually have 3 sections in our workbook or our worksheet, if you like, that you get to work through. And the Learn section is going to give you key tasks to take in the information in this lesson. There's a review section. The review section is going to help you go back over things you've already learned in other lessons to ensure you're able to keep those at top of mind. And then the practice session, which is preparing you for our call when we jump on a call and talk through the material. This is something you want to work on as well, and these are just exercises, be it translation exercises or working with the text or identifying different text forms or whatever it happens to be. These are key things you want to do as well during the day or during the week at least, in between that lesson starting and when our call is. So the practice thing. So the key thing here is to follow the instructions. Make sure you're working with that Learn section. Make sure you're working with the review section, because if you don't review what you've already learned, you're going to forget it. And of course, again, that's the task of moving information from the short-term memory to long-term memory. That's what that review section is really all about. So go through, follow the instructions in each lesson and do as it says, because it's intended to help you. And this is really what you're going to spend that time working on, that big chunk of time that I mentioned you want to do once a day. This is really what you want to be working on, is working through the Learn section and the review section and the prepare section in chunks every day. That way you're spending your time doing the things you know are going to be most productive to help you learn the language. So the third step, in a sense, and this is kind of like a reiterative point if you like, is to get uncomfortable. And what I mean by that is that there are certain things that I'm going to ask you to do in the Learn section and review section that are going to make you uncomfortable. Somebody mentioned on a YouTube comment the other day on our Kids Greek video, in fact, saying, well, wouldn't it be good if we just taught all adults using Kids Greek? And the reality is that none of us who are adults tend to like being treated as children. And yet, when it comes to learning Greek, there are tasks that make us feel like children, writing out grammar material, writing out paradigms or charts so that we can do it from memory. Yet, these are the sorts of things that, though they make us uncomfortable, are very effective for helping us to learn some of the skills and information that we need to have at hand readily, so when we come to the text and when we practice our passing, we're able to actually work with that. And one of the reasons this material and writing these things out repeatedly is so effective is because it draws on multiple senses to help you to remember these things. When you look at a chart, for instance, and you write it out from scratch 2 or 3 times, if you do that, you're getting visual repetition of that. You're able to see it as it comes together visually each time you do it. And not only that, but I recommend that as you write each element out, you say it out loud. And this way you're not only saying it, but you're hearing it. And of course, as you're writing it, you're using kinetic senses as well, which again helps to reinforce what you're learning. And finally, you are hearing what you're saying as you're saying it. So I really want to encourage you to take the time to write these things out. Yes, it feels a little childlike. Yes, it feels like we're kind of doing something that a child would do in some ways, but think of it as a tool, like scaffolding, if you like, that's there just to get these things ground into your mind and your heart so you're able to recall them when you need them and make sure you can get free of tools and be more competent more quickly. And now, this is what I did when I first started learning Greek, and I found that it was really helpful, and ultimately one of the things that made a huge difference, because one of the things I found was that the people in my class when I went and learned Greek didn't do this. And so they didn't have this knowledge at hand. And when it came time to, go through tests and exams and those kinds of things, they were just working from their memory as best they could, and their memory was haphazardly put together. And these drills and these tasks actually allow you to in an orderly manner, put this information into your head so that you can recall it. Yes, I get it. Nobody enjoys doing this, but it is effective, and I want to encourage you to feel uncomfortable and allow yourself to feel uncomfortable so that you can get these things done. Now, you don't have to do them forever, and in fact, the time between them should get larger and larger as you move things from short-term to long-term memory, and eventually you won't have to do them at all because you'll just get used to seeing these things and they'll become second nature. But during that beginning Greek phase, these are important things to do, and therefore allow yourself to get uncomfortable while you do them and practice them and master them. If you're one of those people for whom this kind of process just doesn't work, and I would say that you really want to practice it seriously before you come to that conclusion, then figure out another way to do it. You still need to get this information into you, so figure out another way of doing it. For example, one way you could do this is actually to turn these charts and whatnot into something that you can put into your flashcards app, and that way you can recall it and rehearse it as part of your vocabulary. And so that might be a good way of doing it, and I would want to encourage you to do something like that if you're not going to write the charts out. But give them a good go first, because it really is an effective way of getting it underway. So get uncomfortable and allow yourself to feel that sense while you're going through beginning Greek. And finally, the last step to really mastering this material, now that you've got that time set up, now that you're following the instructions and doing what the lesson material is calling you to do, and you are going through and allowing yourself to feel uncomfortable as you deal with all of this information. So the fourth thing you want to do to be able to master this material is to develop habits. It all starts then with taking something you already do habitually and adding these things to that task so that it just gets tacked on to the end of them. And then there's a whole bunch of things you can do to reinforce that as well. For instance, let's just say you were going to put that 15-minute chunk on the beginning of your day, right at the very beginning, so before you even do your devotional time. So maybe you get up, you go to the bathroom and do those sorts of things, and then the next thing you do is you go to the kitchen and you get yourself a cup of coffee. Let's just say, for instance. Well, once you've got your cup of coffee, have it set up so that you can just go and sit down and start looking at some Greek. Maybe it's a video, maybe it's some text, maybe it's an exercise, whatever it happens to be, but just start doing something on your Greek text and connect that to your coffee. So you have your coffee and you sit down and do some Greek. And when you've finished your Greek, maybe you get another coffee. And that getting another coffee then becomes the reward for actually finishing the amount of work that you've said to yourself you're going to do. So create habits around doing this so that one automated task you already do without thinking every day then becomes a trigger to start the next automated task, which would be your Greek, the things you've decided and determined that you want to do. Now, there's a couple of other little things just to go with this. For instance, there's some apps you can get. I quite like and often recommend an app called Streaks, which is available, I think it's for iOS. I don't know if it's available for Android, but there are other apps that will do the same kind of thing. And what you want to do here is set up recurring tasks for yourself so that every day it's prompting you to complete the tasks that you've wanted to do. For instance, if you want to go through your vocabulary 3 times a day, we'll set up a task in Streaks so that 3 times every day it says, hey, go through your vocabulary. And then each time you've done that, you can mark it as complete. And you can build up a streak where you can see every day for the last 2 weeks, I've managed to do this one thing. The same could be added for reviewing paradigms or reviewing your passing or doing translation work as well to ensure you stay on a certain pace. And that's really what this is about, making sure you're just consistently every day doing the right things that are going to get you from zero, knowing nothing where you are now of each lesson, and to being able to kind of master each of those lessons. So apps like Streaks are really helpful for developing those habits throughout the day and reminding you to complete things and tick things off. Now, if you want more information on developing habits, there's a couple of resources that I really quite like to recommend. First of all, Greg Gifford's book, Heart and Habits, which is Greg Gifford is a professor at the Masters University, wrote this book, excellent book, best Christian book out there on habit development, and I thoroughly recommend you take a read of that. It will connect your desires and your heart to the actual functioning of a habit as well. And of course, then there's the old secular ones, such as James Clear's Atomic Habits, which is very good, and BJ Fogg's Tiny Habits, which I also really like. So those are the three that I would recommend. If you want something to start with, I would probably start with Gifford or Atomic Habits by James Clear. So those 4 steps will help you to take small, consistent steps toward mastery on a daily basis. Again, they were to set aside time every day to do some Greek. Secondly, to follow the instructions in the lessons. Do what it says because they're designed to help you. Thirdly, get uncomfortable. Do those things that you don't like doing, knowing that they are a tool to help you get the skills that you want to get. And there's going to be a little discomfort as you endure that to get those skills. And then fourthly, develop the habits that you're going to need to be doing this on a consistent basis. So if you've got any habits that would help people as they go through beginning Greek and to really cement in the skills, I'd love to hear your comments below this. Let us know below what you would do or what you suggest to people who are going through beginning Greek, and I look forward to hearing your comments there. And if you are interested in more information and you want to start maybe looking at what's involved in beginning Greek, then go to bma.to/get started and start going through my Getting Started course, which will give you an overview of what's involved in learning beginning Greek, other than these lessons that we've talked about in this video. So look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.